What's up, everybody? This is Jon Z with Matt Roybal, as always, and we are here to present 5 tips for beginner foreign comic collectors. Guest starring with us tonight is Scott Mack, a longtime member of the foreign collectors community, and we thought we'd brainstorm and just kind of show some things that be great for beginning collectors to learn and do before they learn the hard way. So some things to help you out, some things to make your life easier as you venture into this crazy little part of the hobby. So welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Hey
guys.
Glad to have you. Scott was here on our roundtable pickups for 2019. We loved having him, and we thought we would bring him back to share some of his knowledge. So without further ado, let's hop into the first one of these. Buy it when you see it.
Yes.
Buy it when you see it. Yeah, I'd say this is probably one of the most important for the new foreign comic collector to be aware of, because foreign comics are obviously more difficult to buy, and so your buying opportunities are a lot less frequent. I think if you came from a background of collecting Golden Age, then you're probably going to be a little more prepared for this part of the hobby. I think this may have been touched on in the past, but buy it when you see it really doesn't mean you just click the buy it now with disregard to price or everything. It's more of like a common sense approach to evaluate each opportunity with a lot of seriousness. So I would say you don't just want to say, oh, I'll buy it later, it'll show up later, because it may not. There's a lot of books out there that we consider ghosts, or things that just don't show up very often, or it just takes a lot of energy to get into that particular country. So, you have to be prepared and armed with a little background as you're, trying to make these decisions. But I would say things like condition. We all know that foreign comics tend to come from countries where you didn't have bag and board cultures. So I would not let condition dissuade me from making a purchase, especially if I have knowledge of a book being a tough book to acquire. You can always upgrade. I mean, how many of us, when we were, doing American books, you'd buy that 7.0 because you knew one day you'd upgrade it to a 9.2 or whatever. Same thing with foreigns. You just got to tick the scale back a little bit. So maybe that taped spine, beat to hell copy of whatever, you might need to be happy with that, because having a copy might be better than having no copy for 5 years. And buying books is not going to get any easier as more and more people are finding this hobby. I think the other thing is you don't want to live with the fish that got away. I mean, it's going to happen to all of us. You cannot win every single auction. You're not going to buy everything that comes in front of you, but have a good sense of what books you want and be ready to strike when that book becomes available. And I mean, even if the book's out of your price range, get to know, ask for pictures if you can, talk to the seller, try to find out a little bit about, if the book's been on the market before, is it, how old is the listing that you're seeing? That might give you a sense of if you have time to think about it. If something shows up on Facebook and it's a House of Secrets 92, you probably have about 5 minutes to make a decision, or you're going to lose the book to somebody else.
Yeah.
But if you find a book that's maybe been on eBay for 6 months, and it could be a good book that no one's just looking for, and you just happen to be the one that finds it, or it's just listed wrong, it might buy you a few days to make a decision. But at least try to buy the book. If it's out of your price range, try to negotiate, try to do time payments. I would just, often you don't get a second chance when you're doing this, and you can always upgrade. And if it's a book that's really that hot, don't kid yourself. If you were fighting to get it, there's probably someone waiting in line and they would take your undercopy. So
Yeah,
that's
very
what I
true.
would have to say for number one, buy it when you see it.
Well, you talked about price, and don't go crazy and not think about it. And I won't argue that, but I will say, don't always let past prices define your decision, because just because 2 years ago, a year ago, it sold for $200 and the person wants $4. If you haven't seen a copy in 2 years, that may be the going rate, and maybe enough people are in this hobby that want it. You got to know how many people are looking for that book. So
that's a good point, John.
Just think about it.
Yeah, especially a book like you were saying, Scott, a Mexican Navarro Haas 92. Yeah, I mean, we know people are looking for that book. You run into that. I mean, I have examples of nightmare scenarios where I moved on. Like you said, I let Sorprendente Avengers 1, Mexican Avengers 1, that I think was in the BF range. I let that book go for $200.
I remember, yeah.
I mean, it was just. Oh, I'll have another option at some point. That book right now, if it were in a slab and graded what I thought it should be graded at, I let that was stupid. And what's even stupider is I had the money. I just
you thought there'd be another shot. We're gonna move to number 2, which is managing your contacts.
Extremely important. Probably one of the most important things for newbies to get an understanding of is how important contact management is. And it's mainly because for so many of us, we think, oh, well, there's got to be a auction site for that country. There's got to be a way for me to just do it online. But there are instances where even in those auction sites for the different foreign communities, there are rare books that won't pop up. You need help. You're not on the ground over there. And managing contacts is like, I'll use Indonesia as an example. There for a while, there was like one contact supplying almost everyone that was looking for Indonesian material for like 2 years practically. It's extremely important. One of the tips that I like to use when you're speaking with a non-American or a non-English speaker is I always, when I'm in the first communication with them, I always Google Translate my messages into their language. I feel like it's a sign of respect. I feel like it's a sign of that, because so many non-Americans, if you're an American watching this, speak English. Very often, you don't have to worry about it for very long because they speak or write enough English that it's not really an issue. And even if you know that they probably do speak English, it's just a sign of respect to those initial conversations. Just use Google Translate. I've even done it where I'll use Google Translate and in my message somewhere I'll say, oh, by the way, do you speak English or do you write English? And most of the time they come back and go, oh, yeah, I speak English pretty good. And then you can move on.
I'll sometimes just do both. I'll send it in a foreign their language and send the English and just see what they respond in.
Yeah, it's just respectful. Another way to manage your contacts is to always keep them happy. I'll give you an example. I did a deal with a guy out of Turkey that I had never dealt with before. It wasn't that big of a deal. I just picked up a Turkish Spawn 9. It was the first Angela. It was a Turkish Spawn 9. And I threw him an extra $10. He didn't say he needed it. He didn't say he needed it for fees. But I threw an extra $10 on top of the deal just for the hell of it. And I said, hey, just in case you got any fees or anything like that, there's an extra $10. He came back and said, no, I don't have any fees. Very nice of you to do that. And I said, dude, go buy you a beer. One time out of the Netherlands, I had a year where I was pulling a bunch of shit out of the Netherlands, and my Dutch contact was extremely awesome and just, didn't charge me hardly anything. So Christmas rolls around and I sent him $25 and said, "Hey, go buy you a glass of wine for Christmas, on me." And he was like, "Oh, thanks, thank you so much," and blah blah blah. Like, so, I feel like that's a skill, that social skill, that social muscle that people in our hobby haven't really had to use, with the exception of maybe wheeling and dealing with dealers at conventions.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the beauty of this part of the hobbies, is just like back in the old days, you've got to make connections, you've got to make friends, you've got to another very simple thing you can do: ask them what's up, ask them what's going on in their country, ask them if they're married, be interested in what's going on. And very often it turns a contact and a source into a friend. And a friend is going to go that extra mile to find that book in that country for you. There's countries that are tough, like Hungary. Try going on Hungarian eBay. There ain't shit. You need a Hungarian contact to get shit out of Hungary. Same with Czechoslovakia. Same with some of the other places. Another tip with managing your contacts: as you grow into the hobby on the foreign side and you start building contacts, one of the best sourcers in the game was a guy by the name of Tony Pomilla. And there were times back in the early days when, I swear, that dude getting like 20 or 30 packages a week from different countries. In order to manage his contacts, he used an Excel sheet. And so if it starts getting too much and hard to manage, create an Excel spreadsheet by country, contact, and then a little note with a list of what they're hunting for you at that point in time and their contact info. Because sometimes you'll have a contact and you'll hit them up and they'll say, "Okay, I'll look for that," and whatnot. And then you don't hear back from them. And oftentimes it's because you need to just go back and re-hit them up and say, "Hey, by the way, I didn't want you to forget about me. Did you find that thing? Blah, blah, blah." And sometimes in order to manage, you just need a nice Excel spreadsheet. And, I've never done that. I tend to not be as organized as Tony was. But Tony, the guy's
got some awesome books.
The guy's a legendary sourcer. In the old days, we don't use this connotation anymore very much, but we used to say there were two types of sourcers. There was the safecracker and the smooth talking swindler. And the smooth talking swindler method is the one where you take your time and you get to know a country and the comic book forums, and you kind of go slow. The safecracker is the guy that just pulls out the cash and says, "Bada bing, I'll give you $1,000 if you can find me that South African book," or whatever. Both methods get results, but I tend to like the smooth talking swindler cat burglar guy, because they at least you're building like friendships and ways into countries that way, which is a little more organic instead of just dropping cash. But both methods do work. But yeah, manage your contacts. Remember that for the most part, a lot of these collectors are just thrilled that someone outside of their country is into their books. And if you can share that passion with them, you'll create a source and a contact that'll help you 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And that's how you get some of these tough books. You don't buy them off eBay. You use a contact to do it.
Yeah, I would even add that safe cracking doesn't always work. I tried that with Iron Man 1 and Submariner 1 La Prensa. It just didn't work. They don't want to part with their books sometimes.
No,
they're collectors.
You drive up the price. But I will say 2 and 1 tie together, because if you've got a good contact that keeps you in the front of the line as they find cool things, try not to say no to them, because the person that says no the least is going to be on the front of their list versus the guy that says no to all the stuff that they have. Yep. And they're not going to get first crack at whatever cool thing they find you didn't know you were looking for.
Exactly. That's why I know some guys that will just buy, and I remember Tony talking about that too. His sources would come back to him with a book that he didn't necessarily want, but you know what? He hadn't gotten that really crazy grail that he needed, so he bought it anyway, knowing that he could use it for trade bait or sell it to someone that would want it and love it later down the road. So yeah, that's exactly right, John. People come to you with stuff, buy it.
Right. Tip number 3. it's kind of the reverse of everything we've talked about in number 2, but it's international browsing on eBay. We've said eBay is not always the best source for some of these countries, but there are countries it works well in Europe and some other kind of countries in that thing. The more kind of off the into the third world and all that, it gets a little harder everywhere. So, but on countries that eBay is an option, you gotta look creatively. You can't just look on American eBay and hope that they've set their shipping options to come to us. So one way to do that is to browse in their country. So if you go through your search and go to advanced settings, you can choose what country you're actually searching through. Or if you're on your app, you go into the settings and it says, country, it'll auto default to the United States. But if you switch it to the other country you're looking at, you're going to get more results. You can then watch that item and flip back to the United States, and it'll translate all the shipping and all that kind of pricing that you have. So it's one way to get a hold of shippers that wouldn't necessarily send to America, but you can kind of find them and then work your way backwards. One other kind of tip tied to that is you got to watch your search parameters. In the US, it's under collectibles, comics, golden age, silver age, Other countries, it's sometimes under paper, sometimes under magazines.
Yeah,
it's under God knows what. And they don't even have. It's not that the seller's putting in there wrong. They don't have that category. So you got to be willing to search broad instead of a lot of time we search narrow in the U.S. So just kind of look everywhere when you're doing this. So.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to say that Mercado Libre earlier in the day, they have comic as a folder now, but they used to not have it, to your point, John. Mm-hmm. They might have had something obscure like book or whatever, and then you started seeing revistas, because that's the Spanish slang for it. And now you're starting to see comic book. Yeah. It's changing a little bit, but you're still 100%. You got to go into those other search engines very broad.
Yeah,
cast a big net.
And I think another good part of the international browsing on eBay is always make sure you have the book you're looking for title in its original language. If you're going in there trying to look stuff up and you don't have the right title, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to be lost. That's huge.
Yeah,
too.
or even like the number.
Yeah, the number.
Like in Italy, I think Conan #1's like really number 11 or something.
Yeah.
It just is
and
an
the publisher
example. And the publisher name. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to throw it back to Scott to start number 4 for us. And this is also another important one. These are all important, but this is a big one for new buyers. Do your research.
Oh, yeah. This is, I think you're right. They all sort of interplay with each other. You can't really have one without the other. But I think for do your research, maybe really focus on, things like pitfalls to be aware of. The biggest one, I think, depending on the country, could be, facsimiles or buying a book and you think that you're getting the contents when in fact it's just the cover. So in previous episodes, like with Iron Man 55, the Greek issue, it doesn't have the guts in it, but it has the cover. So maybe it's the research would be understand what you're buying, because that might have an impact on maybe the demand for the book, or that you won't be dissatisfied or feel like you were misled, because sellers don't, in international countries, they don't know what the hell. They don't know the American context of that book, so they may not be disclosing it because to them it's not relevant. So it's really the onus is on you to understand that indigenous book and sort of its context. And then I think, like I mentioned, facsimiles and reprints, we tend to see some of that taking place in Brazil and like the Middle Eastern publishers, just because the content's so rare that either you have the fan-based material, like you talked about in the episode on the 227 set, or you've got publishers that are now starting to do print on demand because they've clued in that Americans are buying these books, or people people are interested in this material and you just can't find it. So I've seen several examples of those come up, and I think Brazil is another hot spot. The Golden Age material is very hard to come by. You tend to find facsimiles, or maybe the guts are original, but the covers just didn't survive. So they put a facsimile cover on it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and also just knowing some of the things that they do in those countries, like Brazil, we've mentioned before, often removes the staples on a lot of older books just because of the heat, the humidity, and rusting. So you're
right. So you
very likely get a book with no staples, and they won't think anything of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the last thing to mention that you might not think would be a problem in foreign countries, but restoration seems to be very popular. I think that's sort of an innate aspect to a collector. You know, the collectors, that they love the books and they wanted to preserve them and they want them to look good in some respects. So I find like glued spines are very common.
Well, not
Color
as much,
touch,
not as
probably.
much resto as we think conservation more.
That's fair. Yeah, thanks for correcting that. That's
Well,
probably a better
they're trying to
word.
differentiate that in the the grading community of conserved versus restored. Restored is a lot more the color touch and that a lot of, I think, what we see is more often the reinforcing the spine or tape or those things just to make it stay together.
Right. It's more of the conservation effort.
Yeah.
So, but you do see it. It was a lot more prevalent than I would have thought it would have been, just based on my years of buying stuff.
So
that makes sense.
We're going to throw it back to Matt for tip number 5, which is not everyone accepts PayPal.
Yeah. I laugh all the time because it's like, I know I say this all the time, we're like connected by an umbilical cord to PayPal, man. I mean, they just have this monopoly on payment options, and we forget that there's these other great payment options. They might not have the protections, Western Union being a big one. Western Union is global. They are everywhere. And, one of the big reasons, I think, is because of remittances. Foreigners sending money back overseas to their family members. Bank transfers are another option, but I mean, I've looked into doing it once for a big dollar book. Bank transfers are more expensive. I think it can be like $30, $40. So if you're going to do it, you're not going to do it for a cheap book. You're going to do it for a big book. So bank transfers are another option. Or, this is going to sound crazy, but I've done it before. I've actually just traded. So if they didn't either they didn't have access to Western Union, or they couldn't get, for whatever reason, they wanted something else, you can always tell them, is there something that you want on American eBay that I can trade for you in value, and we'll just ship them and they'll cross. I've done that with foreign sellers before. I think I've told that story. It was like some LPs, some records that this guy wanted, and I wanted the Mac 129. So I said, "Oh, so buy you some records out of Spain and then ship them to you? Hell yeah, let's do it." And it is a risk. I mean, it is a risk. How stupid would you feel after you did all this work and then ship and not get the book back? But Western Union I've done it, especially in the Philippines. I've done it with plenty of Filipino sellers. Just be open to however they might decide they want to get paid. And, it's scary to go outside of PayPal. I know it is, but you can do it. Just wear your big boy pants and do it if you want the book.
And this goes back to build relationships. Buy a small book with the guy first. Buy something little and see, okay, yeah, all right, he's going to send it to me. This is how it's going to work. This is how long it's going to take. Just you got to tie all these things together, because it is, I don't want to say it's the Wild West, because it's not like that. It's just different than you're used to. It is not.
Oh, yeah.
Hit a button, it'll be here in 2 days.
Yeah, it's not that world at all.
And a lot of these guys, I mean, they're I won't say they make a living doing this. There might be some that have done well, but they have reputations, and I think they value their reputation in the community, especially if they're in Facebook and things like that. They want they want to be respected, and they go out of their way above and beyond.
Absolutely.
I have a lot of good experiences with international sellers.
And Western Union's cheap. If I go to a location, right? And I mean, I paid one time, I sent over like $300, and I think I only paid like $8 or something ridiculous.
Which is actually cheaper than international eBay fees now, which are,
I
think 5% that either you or that seller is going to eat, depending on how you do it.
Somebody's going to eat it. And all I do is I just make sure I have the seller's name, their address, all that information correct. You go to a Western Union location.
You can do it online as well.
You can do it online, but I think it's a little more expensive if you use the app. Or
you're also going to pay fees for either your credit card or PayPal or however you got there. So yes, true.
So when I use Western Union, I like to use cash. I just go to my bank, pull out the cash, go to a location, and it's easy. And then I just use my phone, take a picture of the ID and all the info that the buyer or that the seller needs, send it to them, and then boom, bada boom, it works. It's a lot of buyers here in America, they've grown accustomed to PayPal, and yes, it's umbrella of protection, and that brings me to another point. If you buy a book from a foreign contact and they send the book over, even if it's sent in not the best condition, you're not going to return the book. That's crazy. You're not going to return it anyway. You're not going to pay to have that reshipped back across either the Atlantic or the Pacific. So keep the damn book and just deal with it.
Learn a lesson.
Or get more pictures.
Guy off your contact list.
Yeah, or whatever. But you're not going to send it back, so you don't need PayPal anyway.
Exactly.
In that regard.
And that kind of takes us back to point number one: is that condition was not really the most important criteria in your decision to purchase anyway, or it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Otherwise, you're not going to have a foreign collection. You're going to have 3 or 4 pristine foreign books, and that's it. You're not going to be if that's the thing that's probably the biggest tip here, guys. I think if you're looking to get into this part of the hobby, get that American or whatever anal, condition mindset. Get it out of your brain, because it doesn't work in this side of the hobby, really.
You can, but it's going to make your life very, very, very tough, and you will not get the books you want to get. You're
going to have a very small collection. Let's just put it to you that way.
All right. For everybody that stayed this long in the video, we're going to give you a bonus tip because, well, we're those kind of guys that are nice like that. So your bonus tip is shipping is unpredictable. I mean, in the States on eBay, shipping is unpredictable. But once you kind of get out of let's call it North America, it gets real unpredictable.
Gets choppy.
I'm gonna throw some shade. The Italians are notoriously bad. I don't know why, but just my experience. But there's a lot of reasons for this. Again, we've talked about they're not a bag and board culture everywhere. To some of them, it's just a book. They don't realize that we are crazy about condition as well.
Hell, they might not have cardboard readily accessible.
Yeah, I was gonna say just shipping supplies. Like here, everybody's like, well, I want a Gemini mail, or I want a shipping box. I want this. They're happy to find a couple pieces of cardboard to use and go. It's just crazy. So very often you will just get a book. If you're lucky, a padded mailer, or sometimes an envelope, and it's sailed across the ocean blue and winds up in your hands. 4 weeks later, and you hope to God it got there mostly the way it started.
Yeah. I have a couple really quick stories that I think people will appreciate. The first one was I bought a book from a Latin American country, and the Postal Service went on strike. And I actually looked it up because I was like, this guy's just blowing smoke, because it'd been like 2 months. And sure enough, I went online and I looked, and I found there was a postal strike, and the book ended up arriving. I mean, it ended up going through customs and all that. But in general, it takes a good 35 to 40 days to get a book from just about any Latin American country.
Yep.
I mean, Mexico's about this.
Even longer. Right now, Mexican customs is on average between 40 and 60 days. And I know this because I bought a book from Rulo, and he's contacted me because I'd been telling him I'm starting to get worried now, bro. And he says, right now, customs in Mexico is
It's backed
insane.
Yeah.
40 to 60 days.
up. Oof.
Yeah, I mean, most places are slow. If you're really in a hurry, ask the shipper to use a different method than the post
Yeah.
office.
They
DHL.
pay the extra
Yeah, you're going to pay a fortune, but if you want that book, go ahead.
fast.
The last thing I'll mention, my House of Secrets 92, it was written in water soluble ink, and it's not the shipper's fault necessarily, but the zip code, like, it was almost completely wiped out, and all they had to go on was Carrollton. So they looked at the city and they're like, they eventually figured it out. But I was on the phone with the post office trying to triage the package. We had a tracking number. You almost always want a tracking number if you can get it.
If you can get it,
that's
yeah.
You got to have a tracking number. And sometimes people will actually put things like, they'll add what they think will help improve the address. You don't want to do that. I talked to the lady at the post office. You just want it straight up: name, street, city, state, zip. Like, don't add any other stuff to it because the scanners can't read it.
Yeah.
So no harm in just saying, hey, please confirm the layout of the address, or have you shipped before? If they haven't shipped to the US before, just give them a quick, just be very courteous about, hey, can you send me a photograph of the package so I can make sure you did the address right.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I've been doing lately with contacts and sources that I don't have a history with. I always tell them, hey, shoot me a picture of your Addy, so I can just confirm it. And that's something that I've been doing lately too, with especially when I'm shipping overseas to some of our other sources and contacts, American stuff. I always reconfirm. I take a picture with my phone of what I've written in, and I send it to them and say, hey, this is going out tomorrow. Just double check this Addy is correct.
Yeah.
Especially with foreign addresses. Remember, John, you had that.
Oh yeah, I was just trying to ship to Mexico, and the guy had sent it to me, and I tried putting it in the postal service PayPal thing 4 different ways, and it just wouldn't take. Finally, had to just handwrite it and move on. So addresses are confusing, and just write it how they tell you. So All right, so that wraps up 5 tips for beginning foreign comic collectors. I want to thank Scott for joining us. Matt, thanks for being on as always. I'm sure we'll see Scott again. If you like our content, please give us a like, a subscribe, comment. Tell us some other things that we forgot about. I'm sure there's some things some of you veterans have thought about, and some of you rookies, what challenges do you not know about and you want to learn about? So give us some comments. Let us know. We'll respond and maybe make another video or talk about it, or at least shoot you a response in the comments. Join the community at Foreign Comic Collector official group magazine on Facebook. There's a link in the description of this video, so check it out there. Check out Comic Book Invest for any other kind of general comic book and speculation investing, general American comic information. So they are one of our partners. And check out Matt on Foreign Calling podcast on any podcasting venue. Myself,
we're all over.
Tales from the FlipSide on Monday nights. And thank you all. We'll see you again real soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.